Okay, so when we talk about building characters, there's a couple of different ways, or a few different ways that we can go about building those. We're going to be working mainly with polygons, and so there are a couple of different polygon techniques that we can use. The first one is very common, and you may have heard it called box modeling, and basically what we're doing is kind of building out the volume of the shape that we're trying to create from some sort of a base object. And so let's say we want to start with something simple like this arm. So we look at the arm and think, okay, just by looking at this, it's pretty much a cylinder that has a little bit of shape to it. So thinking about that, we can actually use something that's going to be close to that already. So we'll go to Create. Let's get a polygon primitive, and let's go ahead and get a cylinder. I'm going to turn off interactive creation so that when we create our cylinder, it's just going to pop into the scene. So go ahead and create a cylinder. It's going to come down here onto the into the grid here. Let's go ahead and turn on smooth shade. Go ahead and leave it in the middle. And so now you can see we have this sort of little cylinder shape. We can go into the creation node here. And we need to think about, are we going to be smoothing this model? Okay, so if you're working with games, those are going to be models that are, you're going to, what you build is what you're going to see as far as the resolution and the silhouette and things like that. But if we're working in film or some other application like that, then you may have the ability to smooth it either at render time or whenever. You're going to be able to take the geometry, the low-res cage you've created, and apply either kind of a subdivision algorithm to smooth that out when you render it. So keeping that in mind, if we're going to be smoothing this, we only need the enough resolution to be able to get that rounded shape. And so we can take this down from something like 20 subdivisions along the axis. We can take it down to something like 8, 10, or 12. That'll give you a nice rounded shape when you smooth it. So if I hit 3 on the keyboard to see a smooth mesh preview, which is what you can do to very quickly preview that, what that's going to look like smooth, you can see that we get a nice smooth surface around the edge. I'll hit 1 to go back to our cage. Alright, so now what we can do is go ahead and increase the height of this. Okay, so we'll get the kind of the length going. And you could come in here to your front and side view and try to match this up a little bit more. We can change the radius and the height. Okay, now we can also kind of bring this up into position here temporarily so that we can match it up a little bit more. Kind of rotate that down. And this will help you kind of figure out, okay, how long should I make it? So I can take the height down a little bit. You can go back and move it. Now you can see I'm moving it in the world axis. I'm going to go ahead and go into the tool settings and change that to object. And now I can move it along that axis, so I can kind of move it up into the position that I want. And we can go ahead and take the radius down a little bit. Maybe something like that. It doesn't have to be exact, but you just want to get it close. Okay. Now we also are going to need to have plenty of resolution in here. This arm is going to bend. Obviously it needs to bend at the elbow. We need to actually add the shape to the arm. So in this case we want to add kind of a minimum of resolution. So we can start to add subdivisions along the height. So you can see I've added 2 subdivisions. So there's 1, 2. So we've got a line right at the elbow. But I want to add a few more in here. So you can see I'm just middle mouse dragging this value, or you can put a value in here on the subdivision's height. But let's go ahead and increase that. Maybe something like a minimum of 6 for that arm. Okay. So now we've got this arm, or this cylinder added. We don't need the geometry at the top or the bottom. This arm is going to be connected to something else, or it's going to be hidden inside, so we can go ahead and get rid of that extra geometry at the ends. So I'm just selecting those. So now we have basically a hollow tube that we can modify. Okay, so now we can come in and start to modify this. So from the front and from the side, we can start to manipulate. So I'm going to go to right click and go to vertex mode. I can go ahead and I'm just going to start by scaling uniformly and rotating. And we can do the same thing here. I'll just kind of scale this uniformly. Now this is does have the shirt on it, and so it's going to be a little bit smaller than that. We'll go ahead and put that elbow in place there. We want the forearm to be a little bit bigger. Keep in mind when you smooth this, it's going to lose a little bit of volume, and so you want to overshoot a little bit from your artwork. So when you smooth it, if we go ahead and smooth it out by hitting 3, it's going to lose a little bit of that volume. And so if you wanted to work from this using a smooth or a smoothed view of your model. Sorry, you could do that too. We'll go ahead and take that wrist down a little bit. We increase that a little. Now it's still straight. You can see here, and so you might want to put a little bit of a bend to it. We do want it to be fairly default so that the rigging can occur, but usually when you build limbs like that, you want to have just a little bit of a bend in the direction that they're going to be bending, even though you want them to be fairly straight when you rig it. You want to have a little bit of a bend in there. So we'll go ahead and add that little bit of a bend in there just by kind of pulling these points forward a little bit. The same thing here. Now you can start to add a little bit of shape to this. When we're talking about joints, things like the elbows and the knees, we're going to typically want to have more resolution around those joints. So what I can do is go ahead and double click to select that edge loop. Go to Edit Mesh, and let's go ahead and offset an edge loop. So that'll allow us to create edge loops on either side of there. We want to have enough resolution to hold the shape for when this actually is going to be deforming. Okay. Here we have one edge loop defining this large shape. I actually want to break that up a little bit, so I'm going to double click, and this time I'm going to use bevel, and that'll split that one edge loop into two, and we can change the offset amount. So maybe something like that, and then you can go back in, smooth it out, and refine that shape from the front and side views. Okay, so maybe bringing this up a little bit. Doesn't have to be the same all the way around. Maybe take that middle part of the elbow and bring that up a little bit. Even though it's a very skinny arm, we'll go ahead and increase that size here just a little. We take this down a little bit. And then for the actual elbow itself, we can start to come in here in the center, right on the back of the elbow, and kind of start to pull that out a little bit. Maybe take this one and pull it in a little bit just to create that look for the interior of the arm there. Okay, so doing a little bit of shaping. Alright, so we've taken a mesh, an existing mesh, a polygon cylinder, something that is close to the piece that we're actually trying to create, in this case the arm. We've kind of put it in a position using the artwork as a guide and the creation node, and then going in and modifying the individual components. We're able to create something that looks similar and matches up in both the side and the front views. Okay, so in the next lesson, let's begin to build the actual hand. That's going to be a little bit more complex. We can't just use cylinders only, but we can use the same technique to build the fingers and then duplicate those so that we don't have to build all 5 of the fingers. We can build one finger and then manipulate those and blend them all together. So in the next lesson, we will go ahead and do that.